everybody thinks about the kicking and punching. And admittedly, the course is mostly that skill acquisition because it takes time and practice, and most people are not accustomed to that, right? But if you do this stuff well and are smart and avoid most situations and everything else, you really make the rest of the class moot, right? And so, I tell my students, in a lot of ways, I hope that what we do is like calculus for you, and that you will never have to use this in real life ever, right? But especially with the skill acquisition stuff, right? But if you do what we cover in those first couple weeks well, then again, hopefully everything else is a moot point. And so that's kind of what I wanted to go over today. I'll tie into the FAST classes a little bit, but I'll try to keep it from being too redundant. And then I did this talk like, 3-4 years ago, and it is on YouTube. Is on YouTube, and you can listen to it, and I'm going to try to keep it from being too redundant from that. I want to give a little more time for question and answers and things like that. If you don't know me, you will figure out rather quickly that I'm a rather opinionated individual. But there's a lot of advice out there. Some of it is very good. Some of this is what I call contextual, like under certain circumstances, maybe that's a good idea, other times maybe not, right? And then there's stuff that I think is absolute crap, right? And you don't always have to share my opinion, but you need to have one, right? And, when it comes to personal protection, and especially when I'm dealing with 18 to 20-year-old girls, this is not pleasant stuff to think about, right? And, it's not stuff that most people like to dwell on, right? And so we tend not to come to those opinions very much because we don't want to think about those things and stuff like that. So it's pretty important that we at least start thinking. And one of the buzzwords we use in the field and classes is what we call mindsetting, right? The mental rehearsal, the mental practice, the mental preparation you need to be ready for whatever goes on, okay? And so if nothing else, right, we can start to get people along that process, right? And all the time I get calls or requests from different groups, sororities on campus or different places or whatever. Can you come in and do like an hour-long self-defense class and show us some moves for an hour? And I'm like, no, right? That's worthless. Right? There's nothing I'm going to teach you in an hour that you're probably going to remember, right? I would much rather go in and start talking about these things and get you thinking, and then possibly you'll keep thinking, right? And you will keep going down that mental process road, right? And you will get better thinking, right? I show you a couple moves, you're never going to practice them again. They're going to be gone in 6 months. Right, if that's not something you want to do, right? That, in my opinion, is a very fruitless exercise, right? But they all want the moves. They kind of show some moves. Like, oh, that's fine. You can talk a little bit, but can you show us some moves, right? Okay, whatever. So anyway, so when we're talking about self-defense or personal protection strategy, okay, there's kind of a overarching checklist that I like to go over and I want to hit a little bit today, okay? And of course, the first is, these are like the ones at my school, right? The first one we have is awareness and avoidance, okay? Now, when most people talk about awareness in terms of self-defense, it's being aware of your surroundings. Don't walk alone at night. I joke that for some of my courses in college, right, I had an evening course for a while. Girls had to walk alone at night to come to my class for me to tell them, don't walk alone at night, right? And, you guys might have lives that require you to be out after dusk, right, and things like that, right? So when we talk about awareness in here, we're really talking about and we talk about this in the FAST class a lot, an internal awareness, okay? How are we contributing to the situation, either positively or negatively? And in a lot of times we're doing that in ways we don't even realize, right? And we have to be more self-aware of things like triggers and things like that, so things don't go out of control and we get into a fight in the sample aisle at Costco, right? You guys hear about that? Like two 70-year-olds got into a scrap at Costco because one cut the other in the line for samples at Costco, right? Right? That's probably a trigger for some people, line cutters, right? Okay? So anyway, right? So being aware of, and one of the phrases we joke in the FAST class, right, is, there are things I'm not proud of, I am aware of, right? Not proud, but am aware of my own tendencies, right? And so that's an important thing, just being able to understand that, an internal awareness. So we have to be able to kind of fix ourselves and before we can then deal with the external, right? So again, we talked about in the FAST classes more and stuff like that, so I don't want to rehash that here. But the other thing with awareness, I will say, right, is there are several other, it is, next time you're out at the party, at the kegger, right, there's just a time to leave, right, when the dynamic of the party changes and you look around and, it was a good time and you look around and suddenly all the people that were going to hook up have already found and gone, and the people that are left are just the people who are pissed off because they aren't part of the other group, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? So anyway, there's just that time, being aware, going, okay, this is the vibe, this is time to go, right? When you're out, maybe in a non-familiar area, your fall foliage festival maybe isn't necessarily gang-ridden in the evening or whatever, but when you're out and suddenly you look around and all the families are disappearing, right? And the crowd is changing. Maybe they know something we don't, right? Now, hey, we were having a good time. This was a great place. This is a different vibe now, right? We need to maybe get out of here, right? So being aware of those kind of dynamic changes and things like that, it goes a long way, right? So it isn't always about checking behind every bush and pieing every elevator right before you get in and everything else. When we talk about awareness, again, it's just a much better social and surrounding awareness. Just a year ago, so I had a girl in my self-defense class come up to me after the class and was basically like, she had it's sad, and those of you guys with people going off to college soon don't mean to over alarm you, but there's a lot of stalkers around campus with a couple tens thousands of women, young girls, right? So this older gentleman happened to be like always sitting across from her where she was studying, right? And he had a book and pretended to be reading. He'd been on the same page for the past 2.5 days, right? Probably held it upside down even, I don't know, right? But was acting like he belonged there, but clearly didn't belong there, and really seemed to be looking at her a lot. And she changed her habit. He still, they moved libraries on campus. Kind of next thing you know, he's there at that library. He was clearly roaming or whatever else. And we talked about what maybe to do and as far as dealing or contending with that moving forward. But my point is this, is to her credit, she was keenly aware. There's a lot of kids out there that would be oblivious to the fact or would not have recognized, that same guy was here yesterday, right? And he really isn't reading that book, right? So, kudos to her for that, right? And being able to do those types of things goes a long way as well, right? Again, awareness. Now, there's there's some situations, right, that you are just not going to be able to, being aware, right, helps you maybe avoid certain situations. But there are certain situations that you can't avoid, right? Trouble finds you. Your job requires you to go into harm's way, right? I use Frankie's example, right? When she worked in the field in DCS, right? She pulled up, right, into a neighborhood, and she walked out of a car, she's being nice, and the lady's like, white woman in a nice car, you must be from DCS, right?
Yeah.
And she drives a Chevy Cruze, right?
It's not a very nice.
She pulled up in a Lexus, right? Okay, right? But look, I mean, and look, okay, she's an outsider. The minute she walked in, people circled the wagons, right? It's an us versus them, right? And right away, okay? And but she had to go, right? I mean, that was her job, right? We do fast training for a mental health company in Kentucky that their employees have to go into some very volatile situations. These people are that close to being hospitalized for mental illness, right? So things, that's some very unstable homes, and people are strung out on stuff or whatever else, and they've got great communication skills, right? But they wanted something else. So we've done some training for their company and things like that before, right? But those people have to put themselves, right, in harm's way that, maybe, a young lady working for them goes, I would never do this personally. This is stupid, but I have to do it, right? Trouble finds you, okay? And so we have to acknowledge that, okay? So a subset of this is the whole de-escalation or deterrence, okay? And so when trouble finds us, there are certain situations that we might be able to de-escalate, okay? Certain situations, right? There are certain things that, hey, I'm really sorry about your car. No, I swear we'll get it taken care of. No big deal, whatever, okay? I swear I didn't know who she was, right? I didn't know it was your boyfriend, right? Okay, he didn't say we were married. There are things that maybe you can try to talk your way out of or whatever, okay? There's a lot of situations, however, that are not necessarily you're going to be able to de-escalate, okay? And so there's a lot of situations that are more predatory in nature and things like that. That if you put a sexual predator on a polygraph and ask them, did you rape them? They'll say no, and they'll pass the test, because in their eyes, what they're doing isn't rape. The rest of society it is, right? But in their eyes, it isn't. Okay, I don't know what rape is then, if that's not what it is, but right. So, so you're not going to have meaningful dialogue in the heat of the moment and dissuade him of his opinion of what he's doing isn't rape, right? That's not happening, right? So there are certain situations, and one of the things that there's a couple of books that I might recommend. There's the Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. We talked about that in the fast class. Anything by Rory Miller. He's got a bunch of them. He is one of my mentors. I've hung out with him a little bit, but kind of have a man crush beyond that on him. He's great. So his books are great. And this book just came out. I shared it on our group page. If this was required reading for young adults, or if there was a book that was required reading for young adults, I would call it this book. Okay, and my daughter had to read Pride and Prejudice over the summer for her class, but as soon as she got done with that, I'm shoving this in her hand, right, and she's reading this, right. So, and this is a really good book. Huh?
What's the name of the book?
It's called Beyond the Picket Fence. And again, it's good for everybody. Mark McYoung is I have a lot of respect for what he does, and it's basically it's good for everybody, but especially young adults. It's basically how to not get your ass kicked in different worlds beyond your little small town suburbia life. Okay, and it makes you think about some things, and it's kind of, and it kind of makes this point that there are things that maybe I've certainly tried to raise my kids with a little bit more of an awareness in this regard. There might have been a few lessons I missed, or maybe I thought they got and they didn't get, or something was implied. This book really just covers all, make sure there's nothing, right, left unturned, right? Nothing gets omitted, right? So, and I made sure the library had a copy of that, right? So you guys can check this out, right? And so you can borrow my copy, but you guys can check this out, right? So I made sure the library had a copy of that book, because I think it's a very important book, okay? But Rory Miller, this is his just way of describing it, but I think it's a very good one, okay? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How many of those are social?
Repeat them.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? How many of them are social? Maybe 1.5. Belonging is social. Self-esteem a little bit because it's tied to other people maybe, but not really, right? Baseline, basic security, food, shelter, etc. Is that social? Okay, as Rory puts it, okay, if your child was starving to death, would you steal? Would you steal food?
Yes.
Everybody would say yes to that if your child's gonna die if you didn't. Yeah, right? So our hierarchy of, morals or whatever else in that situation, right? Okay? If you're a drug addict, your addiction is a baby. And when you're going through withdrawal, it's starving. Okay? Good people, nice people, and we talk about this in FAST a lot too, okay? As good people, we like to we try to find social solutions to problems, right? We like to talk it out. Other human beings like to talk it out, okay? Right? That's what good people do. And as long as you're not really an asshole, you can solve a lot of problems by doing that, okay? The problem is when you get into one of these situations where the other person isn't trying to find a social solution, okay? If the other person is starving to death, are you finding a social solution to that situation? No, you're not a person, you're an ATM. So they can buy food for their baby. Okay? There's no social solution to that problem. Okay? On the other end of the spectrum, highest level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, right? Everybody thinks that, that's like, I'm going to be a great philanthropist and everything else. The most self-actualized people in the world are serial killers. They're above everybody. They believe they can do whatever they want. They're beyond, that's right? They're self-actualized, okay? They think you're an object, okay? They can throw you down the stairs and laugh at you falling down the stairs as much as they would a Slinky, because in their eyes, you're pretty much the same thing, okay? You're not de-escalating that situation. However, there is still deterrence. There is still risk-reward, okay? And this is about becoming a hard target and basically making yourself look like a handful and say, okay, look, right? And this goes to the boundary setting, some of the other things we do in the other classes and stuff like that. Because they understand risk reward, right? I might look at you as an ATM, but if I go to the ATM and go, well, you might get your money, but I'm going to break your arm when you reach for it. I might go around the bank or I might go around the corner to the next bank. I might go to Home Bank, Key Bank, right over here, okay? If I get ready to play with my Slinky and the Slinky turns to me and goes, you throw me down these stairs, I'm freaking taking you with me. I might go get the blocks, right? Okay, so again, we understand risk reward, okay? We understand deterrence, right? In a predation standpoint, okay? So there are certain situations we might be able to de-escalate. There's other situations but more importantly is we have to be prepared to worry about more deterrence about de-escalation. Because again, as long as you're not really an asshole, you take care of these things 9 out of 10 times anyway, right? as long as you're also self-aware and don't realize, don't get triggered and everything else, and you're a normal person, but right at that moment, you're kind of being an asshole, right? So that's kind of the part of it, okay? Now, then of course, if that doesn't work, then we're into the fight, okay? And there's a couple things points I want to make about that, okay? First, okay, you have to be mentally prepared. Again, this mind-setting thing. You have to understand the situation and have made up your mind that you are going to fight, okay? At least under certain circumstances. Like, for example, right? In the case of sexual assault, the statistics will bear out that if you resist, if you fight back, in the majority of cases, the predator will break off the attack. Okay? So the statistics are in your favor to fight back. Okay? Now, however, here's the point, right? If you are worried about getting punched in the face and getting hurt, okay? Part of the reason, I don't mean to oversimplify, but part of the reason that a lot of women submit or go submissive in that situation, right, is because when you're getting punched in the face and they tell you to stop, and there's a way, to stop get punched in the face, if you have not kind of thought through the outcome of being assaulted, okay, and okay, this is gonna hurt like the dickens right now, but if you don't fear the aftermath of the rape more than getting your face busted up right now, you're not gonna fight back, okay? This is an extreme example. You wake up one night, someone's sitting on your chest with a knife to your throat. If you don't fear not seeing your friends, family, orphaning your kids, if you don't fear that more than losing a couple of fingers, you're not going to fight back. Okay? And again, that's an extreme example. There's plenty other what ifs on that. That's not like what we normally cover in our classes. But you get my point here. Okay? You have to have made these mental decisions that you're worth fighting for. You're going to fight until 10 seconds after you're dead. Okay? But you have to come up with those moments that, hands down, this is happening. Okay? Now, there's plenty of other gray area stuff, and we'll talk more about that in a minute too, in the psychological point. But there are plenty of these moments where, if someone comes into my house, right, middle of the night, and, especially if they go towards the kid side of the room, right, could it be, and this is again more, especially in college, right, there are plenty of cases of some drunk guy just stumbling into the wrong building, thinking that, breaking into your house, thinking he locked himself out of his house or whatever else, right? Where I live, that's probably, you're way off, man. Like, you're really way off from any other house, okay? But, could that happen in an apartment and everything else? Yeah, okay? That's up to you how you decide that you're going to play that or whatever else. But like someone walks into my, I'm sorry if he's drunk and in the wrong house. He goes, the only thing I'm worried about at that point is over penetration, right? In the walls, right? So, it just, you have to kind of have decided some of these things in ahead. Because if you haven't, then this is not the time to have that dialogue, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, okay? The other thing that I want to impress upon you is that most people, when they think about fighting, they think about most people's idea or familiarity with violence is basically your social, what Roy calls the monkey dance, right? You're just, your chest thumping, social, stupid stuff, right? And that's very different than predatory violence, right? You guys know the script. Right? Two guys start jawing each other in the bar. They puff up on each other. They literally make each other look bigger, which from a combative standpoint, I'm on my tippy toes. I'm completely square. This is the dumbest possible way to try to hit someone. right? But we got to make ourselves look bigger because I might be against that guy, right? And everything else, right? And I got to stand up and make eye contact, right? Whatever it is. This is stupid, okay? But this is how it goes. And then what comes next?
Shove.
Finish the script. Yeah, there's a shove, and then what does that guy do?
Shove back.
He's got to shove back, and then there's one punch, right? Okay? And then usually after the one punch, then they hug together, right? And then they fall down, and then they wait for their buddies to pull them apart, and they can do the fake hold me back, but in their eyes they're looking, holy shit, that was close, right? Okay? I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, I'm so glad my friend got out, but, they're in, right? Okay? So that's, so you know the script, okay? You know the script, okay? Here's the problem, okay? There's always a chance that doesn't go to script, okay? In two different ways. One, Murphy. Everybody knows Murphy? Murphy's Law, right? Okay? You go to shove, that you're on the script, right? They shove you, you're supposed to shove them back. That's how it works. I gotta shove them back. They fall back and hit their head on the corner of a pool table. Now that's manslaughter charges. Actual case in Indiana. Okay? Murphy shows up and fights a lot. Okay? You're still going to be held accountable for that in a lot of ways, right? We'll talk more about it. The other part of that is there are other places or people that don't necessarily play by that script. Okay? You shove them, you're expecting to shove back. He just takes a knife out and guts you, right? Then they got to clear the dance floor while you're holding your intestines in while the paramedics show up. Right? They're not on the script. Okay? You don't know how, and I'm stealing McYoung's line, but McYoung in this book makes a good point about talking about there are other cultures, honor cultures, that will go to violence quickly as a way to solve, again, it's not how we do things in, kind of middle class, white America, right? But there are cultures around the world or subcultures in America where violence is a faster go-to and a real solution to problems. In some ways, in their society, if you don't go to violence quickly, then you look weak, and it's in their own security down the road, other people are going to come at them harder if they let you get away with it, right? So it's in their own security to do that, right? So that, this is a poignant line. If you think it's never okay to hit a woman, you just defined your social class. And that is not true all around the world, okay? Or in places in America, okay? And there are lots of people, we have this idea of inalienable rights, and we have rights to do this and that and everything else, and usually under those rights that gives us a right to be a real butthead, right? Out in public and do some obnoxious things. You're contingent on other people acknowledging that right, okay? And carrying and respecting your right more than their honor, or maybe they just don't give a crap, right? And they're more, their honor is more important than the threat of them possibly going to jail, right? You're counting on society to hold up, right? Well, they do this, they might go to jail. They won't do that. Well, what if they don't care? What do you got then, right? If they don't care, right? So, again, our idea of violence doesn't always match, and I don't, our familiarity as nice people with violence doesn't always match what all else is out there. And when there's that conflict, again, when we intersect with that other type of violence or predation, then sometimes, right, it comes to bad consequences, right? Another cautionary tale, and everybody knows the Trayvon Martin case, whatever, right? And I use some cases and as a way to illustrate some important things. I'm not trying to get into the social, or the sociological debate about it, or the things like that. But there are some cautionary tales in some of these examples, right? I'm sure like you, my social media blew up. Everybody had an opinion about it. And again, I'm not going to get into all that. But, there were many people that were, he should not have been shot because he was black. Let's make one thing clear, okay? He did not get shot because he was black. He got shot because he picked a fight with a guy with a gun who wasn't afraid to use it, right? In Trayvon's mind, that fight wasn't probably going to, maybe he did, I don't know, I wasn't there, right? But he probably wasn't expecting that to happen, right? How do you not get shot? Don't pick fights with people with guns. How do you know who has a gun? Oh, you saw that. Anybody see this? Or knives. Okay? How do you know? Right? Well, unless you're really good at, seeing that, or in the middle of a fight, you're pretty good at doing weapon checks in the middle of a fight, right? Which is a skill set, but beyond most people's, right? Okay? Then maybe don't pick fights, right? That's how you don't get shot. Now, again, there's lots of other things. The debate about that, whether it should have gotten to that point and whether race and all those other things not going to happen. That's not this time or place to have those conversations, right? But that's how you don't get shot, okay? Right? Is don't pick fights with people with guns, okay? So, again, we have to understand the bigger picture of fights, yes.
In this day and age, that could be anybody and everybody.
Yeah, it is, right? Okay? But there are signs that there are places with signs that you're safe in there. Okay? So, now, there's also the legal side of things, okay? And let me tell you, right, there's a lot of things, right, that this part is almost more scary than this part in a lot of ways, okay? So dealing with the aftermath of this is a big thing, okay? Ladies, you have probably a whole lot less to deal with this in this regard, because in the eyes of the law and everything else, you're poor, helpless little women, and, you can't really defend yourself. You're going to get a lot more leeway, right, than when they find out, if I were ever in a use of force situation, they find out what I do for a living, right? I mean, the standard that I'm going to be held to, they're like, you should have been able to Jedi mind trick them and just sit them down and how did you not take your belt off and tie him up? You left a bruise, right? It's just, come on, right? Okay, but that's going to be the standard of care I'm going to be held at compared to, again, so there's the appropriate level of force aspect. There is a lot of things, but understand this, that self-defense is is a very different type of defense. Is an affirmative defense. In other words, you are admitting a crime took place. You committed assault, okay? You just really had to, okay? That's a very different burden of proof than, you stole that radio. No, I didn't. Prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? You just admitted to a crime, okay? But you're saying I had to. That's a very different way, or that's a very different burden of proof or a very different process, okay? It's not going to be as easy, okay? So we have to be careful, right, in that regard as well. For example, right, if you have shown to have any culpability in the fight, right, if you jaw back on the guy, right? If you shove the guy back on the script and when you go, oh crap, this is bad, I should not be doing this, right? You've already engaged. You got to be really, you got to find a way to disengage. It's got to be clear cut. I'm really surprised that there's not more people that have not heard about this case, but I'm a little surprised, but I think we talked about it in the stress shooting. But anyway, there's a case in Indiana. I think it's still going through the courts. I didn't hear the aftermath, but anybody hear about the lady who tore off her ex-boyfriend's scrotum? See, again, I really feel like this should have been more for Headline News, right, on this, right? Case going on in Indiana. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the exact details, but basically the gist of it. And not too long ago, a judge basically rejected her claim of self-defense. She claimed it was self-defense. She had to. Okay. And again, she's a lady who smaller in stature or whatever else, probably the eyes of the law would normally give you a little more leeway in terms of kind of, getting use of force and everything else. Well, here's the thing though, right? So apparently she went to his apartment where him and his new girlfriend are or whatever else, was asked to leave, ended up in the apartment, would not leave, right? A scuffle and shoot ensued to get her to leave or whatever else, and that's when the ripping occurred. Okay, right? So the moral of the story is you don't get to go bat crap crazy and then claim self-defense when it doesn't go your way, right? You have some culpability. You weren't supposed to be there. If you were trespassing, you don't get the right for self-defense, right? And again, this goes back to what we were saying. You think you have a right. You don't have a right, okay? If I go to a biker bar in an ascot, I'm kind of asking to get my ass kicked, right? So don't complain when I just wanted a beer or whatever. No, right? Okay. Yeah, I teach at IU. I teach at DePauw University. I don't teach there as much anymore, but man, sometimes, right? Sometimes the way some university snowflakes look at situations is, I would argue, is not very conducive to having a very proactive self-defense mindset. Let's just be nice and say that. And there was a case where some minority students at DePauw went to a party. They were asked to leave, right? And they claimed it was because of their race or whatever else. I don't know. I wasn't there. That might be the case, and that's uncool, okay? Or could just been there an asshole, right, when they were there, right? They were being a butthead, and they were told to leave and everything else. Again, I don't know whether it was. And so the bias incident report team got involved, right? Campus got involved in investigating the situation and everything. BIRT, B-I-R-T, bias incident report team, okay? But the point I made to my students is, again, the ascot and the biker bar scenario, right? Okay, I don't know whether it could have been they were just being buttheads at the party, right? And they were told to leave and they kind of made it into a race thing. Again, I don't know. I wasn't there. But the bigger thing is, in the real world, there is no Bert or Ernie whose job is to take care of that, right? In the real world, like I said, you go in that biker bar, you're going to get your butt kicked, okay? And your rights are not as absolute as you might think they are, okay? And a lot of people don't really get that concept, okay? But again, that's kind of a culpability to the situation part. Again, there's the appropriate level of force part, right? Do you finding the right to, how much force are you allowed to use? You found, it's a very old case, but there was a case in, I believe it was New York a long time ago. Guy was walking down the street. One guy and like two or three guys, one with a baseball bat, jumped out, started attacking the one guy. Well, they picked the wrong guy. That guy ended up taking the bat, taking the bat, but then turned it on them, okay? And here's the catch, okay? In the eyes of the law, that's called punishment, okay? So once they took the bat, the threat of, the threat of lethal force was gone when he took the bat from them. Okay, when he turned the bat on them, at that point it was no different than three guys walking down the street and one crazed guy with a bat jumped out at those three guys. Right now, you could argue that's not very fair, right?